Welcome everyone to week number 2 of Biology 120. Let's see what we've got going on this week. So as a quick review for last week, you learned about the scientific method, which is a very organized way to figure out answers to problems. And you gave us an example of how you use the scientific method every day. We use it all the time, every single day, most of us. And it's just a way to critically think of the world and think through a problem and how to solve it or how to find an answer to it. You also learned about the characteristics of life, order, sensitivity to stimuli, evolution, adaptation, all those sorts of things. And it will be interesting to read what you've written about this and how you view viruses, because as I said last week, if you're in microbiology, you do not consider viruses alive because they don't meet all of the criteria for life. And that's what any organism has to do. It has to be made of cells, and viruses, just right off the bat, aren't made of cells. They're much smaller than that. They're just little particles. And they don't do a lot of the things that organisms do, like metabolize, like reproduce on their own, and respond to stimuli, and all sorts of things. So they just don't do that. So you can't consider them alive, but it will be interesting for me to see how you feel about that and how you feel about it after you have looked up information and educated yourself on the topic. Okay, so this week is all about some chemistry, and you might say, this is a biology class. Why are we studying chemistry? Because all of life is based on chemistry. So we have to have a basic knowledge of chemistry before we move on. And you have to understand terminology because we will use these terms all through the term. So read chapters 2 and 3 in your OpenStax textbook, Biology 2nd edition. Remember, it's a free textbook. All you have to do is Google it. OpenStax, S-T-A-X. Biology 2nd edition, 2E, and you will find it. So read those 2 chapters. You're going to learn about inorganic molecules, inorganic, and organic just means, of life, of organisms. So I'll get into that in a second. You're going to figure out the importance of water, and the reason that water is so important and is found in every single cell on the planet that ever has been or ever will be or is alive now is because water has many unique, important properties, but the most important property that it has, to me, is that it absorbs a great amount of heat before it changes state from liquid water into steam. Well, why is that important? Because you've got all this chemistry going on in cells, and all of that chemistry, all that biochemistry that's happening, all those chemical reactions that are happening, create heat, and you've got to have a way to absorb that heat. Otherwise, the cell would burn up. That's sort of like having a radiator in your car. You have to have a way to cool down the engine, or else the engine will seize up and it won't work. So that's the same thing that happens in cells, and so we need this water. It's also a solvent. It adheres, it coheres. So there are other properties of it that are extremely important, but the main one is that it absorbs heat. You'll also learn the importance of carbon. So why in the heck is all of life carbon-based? If you've ever watched any science fiction, you know, and even if you just listen to NASA and figure out what astronauts are doing out there in space, they're always looking for carbon-based life forms. Well, why is carbon so important? The importance of carbon is that it can form 4 bonds with other atoms or molecules. And this means that if you have a backbone of carbon as your molecule, you can make very highly complex structures and very big structures, very big molecules out of carbon atoms. And so that's the importance of carbon. It can make very large, very complex molecules, and that's what's needed for life. There has to be a great variety of molecules that are made in order to sustain life. So that's the importance of carbon. You're going to learn about the 4 groups of organic molecules, and remember, organic just means of organisms. All organic molecules have at least 2 elements, carbon and hydrogen, and the most simple organic molecule is methane, CH4, so 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens. That's the most basic organic molecule, but there are lots of others. Like I just said, you know, if you have a carbon backbone, you can have very complex molecules. And so here are the 4 groups of organic molecules. Carbohydrates, look at the word carbohydrate. So you've got carbon plus water. Hydrate means water, right? So CH2O, that is the basic structure of a carbohydrate. And you know that carbohydrates include sugars and starches, but there are other molecules like glycogen, etc., and some of the structural carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are very good for producing energy and for energy storage, but also for structures in cells. Then you have lipids. Lipids include the fats, oils, and waxes. Their most important characteristic is that they are hydrophobic, water-fearing. They repel water. And so this is an important type of molecule to have. For example, phospholipids make up cell membranes, and this creates a barrier between the aqueous solution inside a cell and the aqueous environment outside of the cell. But there are lots of other lipids. Some of them, like hormones, are chemical messengers that travel through our bodies and other organisms' bodies to help us do what we're supposed to do. Then we've got proteins. Proteins are extremely important. Most of the proteins in cells are enzymes, but some are structural. Some are antibodies, which you've heard of, having to do with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID, because antibodies are part of our immune systems. So most of these proteins are enzymes, and enzymes are really important because they do all the chemical work in cells. They carry out the chemical reactions that take place in cells, so they're extremely important. There are 20 basic amino acids that make up proteins, but they can come in all different combinations and all different lengths to make different proteins that we need. And then finally we have nucleic acids, which include DNA and RNA, but also the most important energy molecule in cells, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So the nucleic acids are really important carriers of genetic information, but they're also energy molecules. So those are the 4 groups of organic molecules. Read up on those because we will talk about them for the rest of the term. Also read your Module 2 overview because that gives you an idea about what we are covering. So what have you got to do this week? You've got discussion board postings, 3 of those, and you also have a journal entry that is due this week. So let's talk about the discussion board postings. Remember, your initial post is due by Thursday before midnight, and your 2 response posts are due by Sunday evening before midnight. So your initial post is all about the importance of the macromolecules. Okay, that's those 4 groups of organic molecules. Macro just means big, okay, big molecules. The importance of big molecules. Okay, those are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. What's the importance of them, and also water in cells, not just in human beings, in cells. Why are they important in cells? So you're going to tell us the function of them. That's basically what we're asking for. What's the function of these in cells? And you'll also discuss this idea of food is necessary plus water is necessary plus X. What could factor X be that produces life? So it can be anything that you can think of that you feel is important for life. Food plus water plus factor X. What is that factor X? So you'll have to give that some thought and see what you can come up with. And you're going to have to explain your reasoning. So we'll see what you come up with. Your 2 response posts, we'll be talking about the necessity of nucleic acids in the diet. If you look at any food label on anything that you can think of, it'll have listed carbohydrates, fats, and protein, right? Where are the nucleic acids? That's the fourth group of organic molecules. Where are they? So what is important here is to look at the structure of a nucleotide. The nucleotides are the smallest subunits of nucleic acids. Look in that chapter 3 and see what a nucleotide looks like. It's a sugar and then a nitrogen group, and nitrogen groups look an awful lot like amino acids. Okay, so that's my hints, but go look at the structure and then you'll know why nucleic acids might not be found on food labels. Okay, there's a hint. All right, your journal entry this week is on the properties of carbon. Remember, I've already talked about that, why it's so important, and the link between fossil fuels and carbon dioxide. Now, I do want to explain one thing. I found a lot of confusion last term about what carbon dioxide, excessive carbon dioxide, does in the atmosphere. It does not open up holes in the ozone layer. I wish I knew how many students have said that. No, that's not what it does. It bounces back down heat that's radiated off the Earth's surface, bounces it back down, so it creates global warming. It does not create holes in the ozone. Okay? So you're going to be discussing fossil fuels and carbon dioxide and why we have excessive carbon dioxide because we burn fossil fuels. All of that is part of this journal entry, and be sure and watch the video that relates to this that's listed in the module introduction, I believe. So this is due by Sunday night. Watch the Reliable Sources video and also look at the Shapiro Library website if you have not done that yet, if you're not familiar with it, because you have a final project that will be due in week number 7 of this course. And that is what I want to talk about next. So in week 2, you need to be looking over this list of final project topics and see if any of them interest you. Some words of advice here. Don't narrow down your topic too small, because otherwise you're going to have a difficult time finding information. It's hard to make the topic too big, but in some cases you might want to narrow it down a bit. All right, so here are some suggestions for your final project topics for this term in this class. If you don't see one that you like, if you're interested in something else, all you have to do is email me and I'll see if it's appropriate and I will give you the okay if it is different from any of these topics. So make sure you email me this week if you want to do something other than what is listed here. Next week you have to get started on this, so you have to have a topic picked. So let's talk about a few of these. You know, I won't talk about all of them, but population ecology. So studying populations is terribly important, especially if you're going into conservation. Okay? You have to do this if a species is going extinct. For example, bald eagles in my state, South Carolina, have been on the endangered species list for a very long time, for decades, but they are making a comeback. So in order to study them, we have to study their population ecology. Where are they located? How many are in a different area? How are they moving across the state? Bald eagles usually follow waterways like rivers up into the state further away from the coast. But what is happening with their populations? Are they increasing across the state? The same thing happens with deer and turkeys and invasive species like feral pigs and coyotes and armadillos. Oh my goodness, we have armadillos now. Who could believe that? Okay, so that's an example. But if you select population ecology, you would want to narrow that down a little bit. Say population ecology of deer in a state. Air pollution. I would narrow that down to a location. You know what air pollution is. But air pollution in a particular area would be good. Water pollution, same thing. You could do water pollution of the ocean. That's perfectly fine. But I would not say water pollution everywhere, all over the whole surface of the earth. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. The energy crisis and the burning of fossil fuels, that's a good one, and possible alternative sources of energy. Eutrophication is the aging out of waterways, and also this includes algal blooms, which are very important for some states. I know Florida has had a terrible time with algal blooms over the last few years because the algae cut off the oxygen for all the other organisms, plus they release toxins that are neurotoxins, and so they're quite deadly. So that's part of eutrophication. The human population. We're expecting the human population to reach about 9 billion by the year 2050. We've got a whole week on this, our week number 8. But if you want to cover population, the human population and how it is changing, that would be good. Genetic modification. Be more specific with this one. So genetic modification of crops or livestock or something like that. Deforestation, terribly important issue in the world today that's contributing to global warming. We have one country, Brazil, that has the majority of the Amazonian rainforest in it, and they are chopping down trees about as fast as I don't know what, and the government is encouraging this. So it's a terrible problem, but it's also a problem in the United States as we build more and more subdivisions and clear more land, make more malls. Deforestation is a problem. Biodiversity and lack thereof, and endangered species, another good topic. Global warming, climate change, so important these days. And thankfully we're getting back on the right track with that, but I don't know if we're getting on the right track fast enough. That's for your generation to figure out. And waste management. How are we dealing with waste? And if you want to do waste management in your area or the United States or somewhere where it happens really and they do a really good job of it, great. But there are other topics, like I have a few here. Microplastics that we are finding everywhere, including in the ocean, including in marine life, in fish and lakes and ponds here. Microplastics are everywhere, and it's just a matter of time before they enter the human body. So I'm just saying. Light pollution, that's also a good one that's not listed here. If you ever go outside at night and you're out camping and there's no civilization around, you realize how much light pollution there is in cities and neighborhoods. Because if you're out hiking in the wilderness, you can see all the stars. But if you're in a neighborhood, nope. It's just not going to happen. You're going to see some stars, but you don't see a lot of them. So light pollution is another problem. If you've ever flown over a city at night, if you've ever flown across the country at night, you see what a problem this could be. So that's another suggestion, but there are others. So if you don't see your topic that you're interested in, just give me a shout and I will be glad to take a look at it and help you decide whether this is a good topic for your final project. All right, remember, you need to choose it by next week because next week you got to get started on it. My tip of the week is to jot down a list of things that you need to cover in a discussion post, in a journal entry, wherever. Just jot down a little list. I have notes everywhere. Just to help me remember that, to make sure that I cover everything. So jot down a list, because I will guarantee some of you are going to get a little bit mixed up this week, especially this week, with that journal entry. Because you're going to miss one of the questions, the question at the top. What's the importance of carbon to life? So jot down a list of things to answer so that you make sure and answer everything that you need to. Okay, I hope that you have a wonderful week, and let me know if you need anything. There's my email address right there, m.sigmon@snhu.edu, and I am here for you. I will help you with anything that you need help with. Okay, so I hope that you have a wonderful week and a happy Labor Day today.